Welcome to the Off the Beaten Career Path podcast. I'm your host, Katie Myers. Here you will find the inspiration, strategies, and tactics needed to reach the next level and beyond in your small business and career. Thanks for joining us, and get ready to put these ideas to work for you. Hey, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Katie Myers, and I am here today with Olivia Acton. Olivia is a luxury photographer based out of Janesville, Wisconsin, and her work is absolutely phenomenal. You can see it right on the cover art for my podcast. She recently did all of my headshots for my podcast branding, and I am super excited to have her on the show today because Olivia certainly has one of the more interesting career stories that I've heard. So welcome, Olivia.
Hey, thanks, Katie. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm super excited to talk to you about the career transition that you recently made. So can you kind of bring us back to the beginning? And because your original career was in nursing, can you tell me a little bit about what interested you in that, what your career was like while you were in nursing?
Sure. So I was a really young mom. I became a mom when I was 20, and I was in college and had already chosen the path of nursing. So I was continuing that once I had my first little guy and graduated in 2013. So I was a nurse ever since then. I still have an active RN. So I wouldn't consider myself not a nurse anymore, but I'm not actively practicing at this point. And my nursing career was wonderful. It was a stable job for me and my family. I very much like to serve people, so it fit well with kind of my life goals and my care for people. And it was a great career for a long time. I have 4 kiddos, so at one point, I had to make a decision if I wanted to stay in my nursing career or if I wanted to sort of explore something on my own. And ultimately kind of made that leap a few years ago to stop nursing. I'm going to backtrack a little bit, but when I started nursing, I started working in the operating room and did some different career changes throughout my nursing career. So I worked in the operating room and then on a ortho-neuro floor for a few years. I moved for a little while and was working in the NICU. And then when I moved back, I work at the pediatric ICU in Madison. And then I was getting my master's degree in nursing education. So I came back to ambulatory surgery, which is a busy job, but not as stressful while I was finishing school. And then I was teaching. So when I started my photography business, I was doing both education as a nursing instructor and doing my photography on the side. And so then my career kind of got to a point where I essentially was looking at choosing one or the other. It was just a little bit dealing with COVID times and everything, dealing with my kids' schedule and everything, and largely income potential, largely making my own schedule. So those are all factors that contributed to me kind of making the switch.
How long ago did you start doing photography? And how long was this overlap where you were building your business while still practicing being a nurse?
Yeah, great question. So I have been a hobbyist for quite a long time, probably anywhere from 5 to 7 years, I would say, is when I got my first little digital camera. I started with just, what was it, a TI-7 or something like that. And so I was just a hobbyist kind of learning how to use my camera for my kids. That's ultimately what I initially wanted it for. I had no intention of making a career out of it initially, which I know is how a lot of photographers will start, is that they, and maybe they do have an intention of a career, but that's my intention was my nursing career at that point. So I started having people just kind of ask me to photograph them, and I wasn't really anticipating any type of pay at that point. And then I started kind of doing it for pay probably 3.5 years ago, and then decided to incorporate my business into an LLC at the very end of 2020. And then I did both for about a year. And then in January of 22 is when I decided to just be full-time.
So interesting. And so can you tell me a little bit more about like emotionally what that transition was like? Because that's a really big change to go from being in the nursing industry and doing so. You obviously loved it because you did it for a really long time. What was that transition like for you personally and emotionally?
It's an interesting question because when I made the change, I did not expect to have much of an emotional reaction to the transition, but I did. And there was a little bit of depression in the beginning, in the first like 6 months or so, because I was going from working with other people and being around other people frequently to being alone a lot, and yes, of course, working with clients, but my day to day, a lot of the time was by myself, and not having to be up and ready at 6 a.m. So it was a transition. And I think that the way that I dealt with that was getting more involved in the community around me. That helped a lot. And just giving it time to kind of transition to not feeling like I constantly had to be working, and that to start like kind of building my schedule and making that transition to like, it's okay if I'm home and I'm working, to not having to be somewhere all the time. So there was definitely a transition, but ultimately I wouldn't change it now. And like I said, I didn't expect to have a huge transition initially. I thought it would just kind of be like, fine. I've gone through periods where I've stayed home with my kids and stuff like that, short periods, but it was, and there was a large part of me, and still is, that misses nursing. It will always be a part of me, but I really love what I do now, and, ultimately know that this is the right path for me.
I think we have a lot of listeners that are in the middle of that transition where they have their day job that they started with and they're trying to build their business to the point where they could leave. How did you know, especially you have a family, you have 4 children, how did you know it was financially, emotionally, strategically, all of those things? Like, did you set goals for yourself with your business before you knew you could leave nursing? You don't have to talk specific numbers or anything, but just how did you have the confidence and know that it was the right time to jump ship?
Yeah, great question. So when you're an instructor, you typically would leave, or at least I left around the semesters. So my options were to continue for another semester or to just go ahead and make the leap. It's a scary thing to leave a stable income, for sure. I was in my photography business pretty close to what I was making in my nursing careers already. So I knew that I could make that transition. However, if you're not there yet, I think the key is to saving a little bit. You have to be responsible. You can't just be crazy, especially if you have a family. If you're a single person, maybe that's a little bit different. But, for me, I have a family. So there was kind of a risk, right? So because photography, and when you run a business, it can wax and wane. So there was a risk. But for me, it was also what I needed to allow my business to grow. When you have a full-time job it restricts the hours that you can focus on your own business. That was a key for me, was leaving my position and being able to be doing what I'm doing full time and to not have other distractions to be able to ultimately grow. So there was a little period, probably for 3 to 5 months or so, where I was nervous, but ultimately I was bringing in at least a very similar income to my nursing position immediately. And really it helped my business boom much faster than it probably would have had I stayed doing both at the same time.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I've also heard you talk about that you have gone out and gotten business coaching and mentors and groups of people to help you. Can you tell me more about how you even came across that, got involved with that, what your advice is to other people that are trying to start a business and looking for that guidance?
Yes, for sure. I think mentorship is vital to growing a business fast. So yes, you can tweak and you can figure things out and you can trial and error things for years and years and years. But if you want to have a business that goes from this point to the next point, your goal, in a streamlined fashion, you have to get some sort of mentorship. So, the way that I found it was just through a lot of research, a lot of Facebook groups, a lot of, just active research and trying to educate myself, because I'm not naturally a business runner and owner. I didn't go to school for business. So even a photography business has a whole business aspect, and you have to learn marketing. You have to learn all the things that go into running a legitimate business if you want a legitimate business. And, so that really was how I found what I'm doing now. My coaching is very, very niche for what I do. I'm considered a luxury photographer, meaning that, yes, I cost more, and I also provide more in-depth service and quality service to my clients. So there is a pretty big difference between how I run my business and how maybe the run-of-the-mill photographer runs their business. And that was all implemented from the beginning of my business. So that, I think, helped me grow as much as I have in a relatively short period of time. I am a six-figure earner and got there relatively quick because I had a mentor and coaching. I still am heavily involved in coaching. It allows me to be around individuals that are like me and have the mindset that I have and that I can bounce things off of, because there's always going to be situations that come up that I'm like, I'm not exactly sure how to handle that. Let me turn to people that I know and trust that run very, very successful businesses to help me.
I think that's a really interesting topic too, is business ownership and how it's a completely different job. Like, I knew before I opened my own business, like, I knew I was a good insurance agent, but me being a good insurance agent and you being a good photographer doesn't mean that you're going to successfully run a business. It's a totally different job. Was that surprising to you when you first started it, or were you really well prepared, expecting that there were so many different hats other than just photographer you would have to wear?
I definitely was not prepared for that right away, but I did figure it out pretty quickly, just because when I learn something or when I have a desire to learn something, I am like the kind of person that is hyper fixated. I have a little bit of like the adult ADHD going on, I'm sure, just like most of us women moms do. So I get pretty hyper fixated and was very in what I needed to do to make this business successful. And absolutely, it was a big it was a lot of knowledge that I had to gain to be able to successfully run a business. I think that it's so important to understand that being good at your skill is an entry point. You must be good at your skill, and not the best. I am not the best photographer in the world. I mean, by no means, but I'm good at my skill, and that's an entry point. You have to be good at the skill to start charging in a way that is going to be profitable. You can charge whatever you want to charge, but unless you know your numbers, know your cost of doing business, know your cost of goods, everything like that, then you have to know that stuff to be able to charge numbers that make sense for your business. And the best thing that I can do for my clients is charge what I charge, because that allows me to keep my doors open and allows me to offer the service that I offer.
So I want to talk about that, because I think you hit on a lot of really interesting things, especially when you own a business that you set your own prices. I've heard a lot of business owners struggle with that and, having the confidence to raise their prices. And I know what your pricing is, and it is higher than a lot of other photographers in our areas. How did you feel confident in setting the prices there? And you said, I got to make sure the prices make it so it's profitable enough. Like, how did you know that? How did you figure that out?
So some of it was through the coaching that I am involved in. So that was a big help, but also knowing my numbers, knowing what I needed to make per month to support my family, to save money, to, be successful and to keep my business running smoothly and steadily, and to also live a halfway decent life, right? Because what are we all doing this for if our life is going to be penny to penny? That's what I've always had. That's not what I wanted. So to be able to live somewhat comfortably. And so a lot of it was doing the numbers, doing the number of clients that you need at those numbers. And there's always going to be a little give and take. You have to prepare yourself, right? So there has to be some wiggle room in your numbers. And there is a lot of mindset shifts that must happen for a person to get into the six-figure range. So to get from 0 to 100, there's a lot of mind shift work that needs to happen. To get from 100 to 200, there's a lot of more mindset shifts that need to happen, and so on and so forth. And I think as we get to those numbers, our mindset continues to grow. For me, it was doing things scared, because there was definitely times where I was like, how am I going to raise my prices, and will people book me? And it was just kind of taking the risk. Fortune comes to those who take the risk. And I think that you have to expect, or I had to understand, that the volume of clients is going to reduce the more you cost. So yes, you might book a ton of people if you charge $50 for a session. Okay, you might book a ton. But when you're booking in the thousands, you're not going to book as many people, but you're still going to make significantly more. Again, the best thing I can do for my clients is charge what I charge, because there is no way that I could possibly provide the level of service that I do, charging pennies and not making a profit. The only thing that allows me to serve my clients in the way that I do is to charge what I charge.
Absolutely. And being one of your clients, I think you were absolutely worth every penny. I was so happy with the entire experience, start to finish. My photos are beautiful. So thank you for that. What you're doing definitely is working. So I want to talk more about how you manage all of this. So as far as I know, you're still a solopreneur. You don't have any employees or anything?
I have a contracted hair and makeup artist. So that, I mean, I suppose is somewhat of an employee, sort of. But ultimately, no, I run my business myself. I am getting to the point where I'm going to start needing an assistant pretty soon here. But yes, ultimately I do most everything myself. I do have another contracted editor who I've trained to edit in the same way that I do. So my turnaround time can be a lot faster. So I definitely have some expenses and some people that help me run my business, but ultimately I do run, the majority myself.
So how do you decide when to, that's been something that's been really hard for me in my small business. How do you decide when you're ready to bring someone on, and how do you make those decisions quickly and for the better of your business?
For sure. I think that you have to do it before you're ready, I think is the main thing. When you're starting to get into that growth mode, I needed to put some of those things in place, like my editor and things, before I was ready. So I know that outsourcing is ultimately what allows growth, right? So not only mindset shifts, but outsourcing. We can't do everything ourselves. We can train people to do things similar. We can be, overviewing things, but I have to have time to put my name out in the community, networking and being involved in the community, and taking the time to spend with my clients that I do have. Those things are what ultimately is going to be the money-making activities, and that's where my focus needs to be. So the things that I'm able to outsource, like everything that I do outsource quite a bit, but it's not all business related. Some of it is my house cleaning, things like that take up my time, but are not actively benefiting my business. So in terms of balancing everything, that's something that as I grow, the more I will outsource. And that's how it goes, right? That's how you grow. Doing it before you're 100% ready. You got to take those small leaps in order to get that growth. And then in terms of balancing everything, I use time blocking. So I organize my schedule the way that I need it in terms of my kids first. And then I kind of work backwards. So my kids, my clients, and my shoot days, my business work, my networking days, everything like that. So I'll have that all time blocked in my self-care time, right? Because I go to the gym actively. I try to do meditation and things like that to take care of my mental health, because we all know the older we get, the harder it becomes to manage mental health as well. And, living in the world that we live in, that becomes challenging. So all those things are really time blocked into my schedule. And I am not a person that is like minute by minute blocking things out, but I know that on, Mondays, those are session days. I know that on Fridays, those are session days. I know that every other Saturday, those are session days. I know that Thursdays is my networking days. I know that Tuesdays is my, my business days where I'm working on galleries and orders. And I know that Wednesdays is my consult day, so I have that kind of schedule set up that allows me to bring my kids to school every day and pick them up every day and be at all their events, but that also allows my business to grow really readily.
Well, that's super interesting. And I think I've been coached to do time blocking forever. And I always kind of shied away from it because I know that I couldn't stick to that minute by minute. So that's really inspiring to me that you still are successfully using time blocking and you're not holding yourself to this standard, because, that's hard to do.
Oh gosh, it's so hard to do. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, if something, if I absolutely must do a session on a Tuesday, I'm just swapping those, right? So I'm just doing what I would normally do on Tuesday on a Monday, and what I normally do on Monday on a Tuesday. So I'm still doing the same things, but there has to be that flexibility, especially as a parent. I have 4 kids. Somebody's always sick. So,
Yeah.
And I have to be gracious with myself because I can't do it all. And there are things where sometimes I have to have things in place for, say, my kids. If something comes up, I have to have backups and things like that. And then also, I mean, if I can't make a networking thing, it happens sometimes. And I have to give myself grace and know that this is just a phase of life. And, ultimately those things are what helps my business grow. So they are very, very important, but that things don't have to be so stringent.
So it sounds like you've been able to create like the lifestyle that you were really looking for when you started your business, plus being a six-figure earner so early on in your business. How have you figured out how to do that? Because I think we've all grown up with like this hustle culture where we got to work more to earn more, but you're earning more and it sounds like you're working less. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. And you know what? I won't say that I have accomplished that. So I'm still really working on that. And that is one of my really big goals for this year, is to stick more to my time blocking. So if I say I'm not working on Sundays, I am not working on Sundays. So that is something that I think comes with time. And I have not mastered that. I still work too much, in my opinion. I still work more than I want to work because there is that hustle culture and that like almost anxiety, like, oh, if I don't get this done right now, it's going to like eat at me, or, somebody might be unhappy. And I am finding that that's just not the case. If I am able to effectively time block that during the times that I want to be working, then I don't have the stress of, oh, I need to get this done. I need to get this done, because it's already done. And so it's still something that I'm working on. I have committed to myself to take 2 days off per week where I am not making calls. I'm not working on website updates. I'm not on social media unless it's just for me to block out the world for a few minutes. I'm not doing things business related. I'm focusing on me and my children and things that I enjoy. Do I do that all the time where I'm taking those 2 days off? No, I'm still not there, but I'm getting better. And again, it's a big goal for this year, is to really value my time and value myself enough to not constantly be working. Because again, what do we do this for if we're just going to burn out and drown ourselves? I do this so that I can live the life that I want to live. And there's no point if I'm going to be burned out in 6 months because I'm totally overwhelmed and don't want to do it anymore. Or I don't know if you've ever gotten to the place where you feel like you have so much to do that you don't do anything because you're so overwhelmed. So I think all of those things, is ultimately that, that's the goal, is to live the life that I want to live. I don't know that I'm there yet, but I'm definitely making improvements as I go and see. And I think the more you grow, the more you see those things.
I think you make some really good points there. You love what you do. I know that too. Sometimes it's so hard to like take that step back because you are so excited, you are so invested. But I also think that being at this stage in life, it was very different, 10, 15 years ago. I know that I have to step back and kind of pace myself, or I am going to get burned out and exhausted, which I'm sure you know that too. You've already been through a stressful career.
Yeah, yes, for sure. And I think that a lot of what prompted me, like last year I was still doing the time blocking and stuff. I just was not as diligent with taking time off. And so from, September to November last year, I remember thinking like, I have worked every single day for months. There's not been a single day where I haven't done something. And I was like, something's got to give here, because I could feel that exhaustion coming where I'm like, I just want a break. And I think to avoid that being sure that I'm taking time for myself, at least at minimum 1 day a week, and then taking regular times, a couple times a year where I take a week off and I'm not doing anything else except for just vacation or family stuff or whatever it is that I want to be doing. So that has been built into my calendar for this year. So I am looking forward to sticking with that and seeing how, watching myself feel better throughout the year.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think it comes with time and experience too. Like you
Yes.
learn to trust, like the business will come. I can take a week off. I can relax. We're not,
Yes.
house isn't going to get foreclosed on if I do that.
Mm-hmm.
But in the beginning,
Yep.
that's so hard to coach yourself to do that.
Yes. And so I was committed to taking 2 weeks off during December, during the kind of Christmas holiday break, because I had been working a ton and, I still did a little bit. Like I still had bookings and stuff like that, but I didn't take any active sessions. So I wasn't doing any consults or ordering appointments or sessions or anything like that. I would take leads in my phone calls to keep my business active. And I still met my goal financially for the month. And doing that made me realize that I don't have to run myself into the ground to run a successful business. And in fact, the more time that I take to take care of myself will allow me to be more active in my business when I'm setting my time to be active.
I want to talk a little bit about your networking strategies too, because I love networking. It's something that I really enjoy, that I attribute to, networking is a big part of the success of my business. And I know I've heard you say the same thing, that it's a big part of your business, but I think we have very different personalities. I'm very outgoing. I would describe you as more of an introvert, more of a quieter person. So tell me about how you, with that personality, how you've been so successful with networking.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I am pretty introverted, and in fact, I used to get told that I would come off as kind of just because like I just have like a resting face, one of those resting faces that's like serious, and I'm actually like really pretty lighthearted, and I consider myself to be like a sweet person, and so first of all, if you haven't read the book called The Introvert's Edge, you may not need that book. It's a good book for everybody, but it's a good book for introverts specifically, and kind of how to use your introvertedness to your advantage. And so networking is still somewhat difficult for me, not attending necessarily, but to speak about myself and to like actively engage with other people. And so what has helped me is being involved in more structured groups. So I'm involved in Wisconsin Power Partners, and that is a more structured group. They do have events where you kind of go and jump in and just talk to people and show up, but it's sort of like a BNI type structure where you are kind of going around and talking about your business, and the repetition of seeing the same people, several times a month has helped my business. And, I've photographed the majority of the people in that group by this point. Now I am involved in some other networking things, like in this area for Janesville, which their networking meetings are a little bit more, they're not so structured, right? You kind of show up, you talk to people, and it's bigger, it's much bigger. And I think that is so wonderful, right? I think that both structures are very beneficial, but a little bit more intimidating because you have to be willing to kind of put yourself out there. So when I go into networking meetings like that, it is draining for me mentally, because I just don't love that, but I still feel like it's necessary, and necessary not only just for my business, but just for my personal growth, because our life, in my opinion, is all about the stories that we create in our own heads. So the more I tell myself I'm an introvert, the more I'm in my shell, and so I believe that, yes, I have these patterns of an introvert, but I still believe that stuff that I can work with or overcome. I might not ever be the most outgoing person, but I don't have to be some person that's just stuck in my house all the time. So I have a goal when I go into networking meetings like that of connecting, making friends with 2 to 3 people. And if I've done that, then I feel good about that networking meeting, because I've definitely gone to meetings like that where I don't know who to talk to. I'm too overwhelmed. And then I end up not making any connections. So if I go in there with a mindset of connecting with just a few people, and I feel like I've accomplished that, then it helps my business grow. I feel good about that. I don't feel overwhelmed. And networking, I think, it's a slow game. It's not something that you're going to go do and suddenly you're going to get 50,000 clients. Okay. It's a slow build. It's connecting with people. It's caring about other people's businesses and how you can serve them. It's not focusing on yourself. It's not going to hand out your business cards. It is going in with a genuine desire to connect with your community, and then allowing your business to grow from that, right? Like the goal is always business growth, of course, but to get there, you got to be wanting and willing to connect with other people and caring about other people. So, I think that changing my mindset around networking is what allows me to go into those networking events as an introvert and still be successful with networking.
Yeah, I think you make a really important point about that, because even those big Forward Janesville events, I mean, when you're talking about this, there's like 200 people at those events. And even me as a very outgoing person, it's intimidating because you just got to like bust into a group of people and be like, hey, what's up? This is what my job is. It's hard, but I really like what you said about how it's a long game, is not instant gratification. And I think a lot of people go into networking with that expectation. And I think we have a really similar view of it in that I just want to provide so much value that people feel bad not working with me. I mean, I know I have a really good business and I just want to provide so much value to people that when they need something that I can offer, like they don't even have to think or feel. I don't want people to feel obligated to work with me, but they're just like, hey, Katie, she's helpful. I'm going to go to her. I know she can help with this. So I think that's a really interesting way of looking at it, especially if you're somebody who just doesn't enjoy the networking. You got to find the way that it makes it easy and fun for you.
Right. And then it becomes enjoyable because you can go into those meetings and you can leave feeling like you've accomplished something, you've connected with other people, and that it wasn't a total waste of time. But there are some things that you just have to do, even though you don't feel like doing it, right? You have to step out of your comfort zone in order to be able to grow and to kind of overcome certain things about yourself.
You've talked a lot about that, about stepping outside your comfort zone and pushing yourself. Mm-hmm. And you've grown so much and so quickly. Like, where did you learn to do that? Because I know for me, that's something that I'm really passionate about, is stepping outside my comfort zone and pushing myself. But I didn't figure out that I could or wanted to do that until just a few years ago. Like, what was the turning point for you that you knew you really wanted to grow in that way?
I guess that's a hard question to answer. I read a lot. So I read a lot of business books, a lot of mindset books. And I think that that's a lot of where it comes from, is that I truly have come to believe that my fears, the things that hold me back, are all stories that I tell myself. And so if I could recognize those stories and see where they're holding me back, then I am able to say, okay, this is just something I'm making that up in my head. I'm telling myself that. And that's not necessarily who I have to be. I can be whoever I feel like being, that really our lives are just created on stories. And so I think that the mentorships that I have done and, listening to certain podcasts, and I listen to mostly audiobooks on business and mindset and things like that. So again, meditating, stuff like that, I think just little by little over time has helped me see where my money blocks, quote unquote, are, but not just money blocks, but just like personal in my brain blocks, mental blocks.
And I have another question. So how has growing your business and making this huge shift from your previous career to business ownership, how has that changed some things in your personal life? I know for me, that was something I had to step out because like my family wasn't expecting this. My friends weren't expecting this, and being able to get comfortable in what I'm doing and finding that support in maybe places that I wasn't finding support in before, because those places weren't going to be as supportive as my new mindset. What was that experience like for you, and how did you deal with it?
So when I left my nursing career, I didn't tell my parents for like 6 months, wow. Because I just knew my dad is very much, he's been at the same job for 30 years, kind of that mindset, like work hard and long and, save for retirement little by little and, put the time in. And he still works, he's a great guy, and I've learned a lot from him, but he definitely, I knew, was going to have an issue with me leaving my nursing career. So I told him when my income was at a comfortable level that I could say, look.
And to interject, you were like a master's level nurse too, weren't you? Like you have a ton of education.
Yes, I do. Like my dad knew that he thought I was doing both. And I just kind of was like, yeah, I wasn't like, I was sort of like lying by omission. I just wasn't really talking about it. And so at one point, he came to visit and I actually didn't even tell him. My son told him. And my dad, then he like pulled me aside and he was like, did you quit your job? And I'm like, yeah, I've been quit for a lot of months. And it was fine. It was fine. I was nervous. And I was also nervous about the judgment that I would receive in my community. And I'm not from Janesville. I'm from Houston. So I moved to Janesville when I was in my earlier 20s. So I've lived here for about 10 years now, aside from about a year where I moved back to Texas for a little bit of time. And so when I made that transition, I was definitely nervous of the judgments that I would receive from like all the involvement that I had in Janesville was based around my nursing career. So all like the friends that I had, anything like that. So I was nervous about that, but you just have to not care, or just again, kind of do it scared, because there are, I'm sure, people that still are now, to this day, probably like, I can't believe she just left her nursing career. And I have to do in my life what I want to do with my life. And people have gotten on board with me. And if they don't, that's okay too. I am definitely not hurting for business. So those people that maybe think negatively of my move, or, are kind of like, what the heck? That's okay. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. And, the least of my concerns nowadays is what other people think about my career.
Yeah, I think that is such a powerful thing to say. It's so easy to be like, yeah, just like don't care about what people think or anything, but it's a really hard thing to do and to live that. And you got to continually, I even now have, you have a little imposter syndrome, or you think, what do they think about this? It's like, does this matter? Does it matter what this guy thinks about what I'm doing? Because this is for me and my family.
Yes. And there's always going to be imposter syndrome to some degree. I think no matter how much you grow, and it's always going to be, at least in my experience, new things. So the longer that you do it, the more that you grow, the longer that your mindset is changing and that you're open to evolving, the more things start to come to light, and the things that I see as holding me back now are not things that I saw when I first started. So some of it is just comes over time. And with that growth, and imposter syndrome is ever changing. So it's always going to look different in 5 years than it is right away. But it's still always something I think that entrepreneurs will kind of battle with. I think that it never just disappears. It may change and evolve and maybe not have a hold like it did at some points in time. But I think it's something that always has to be recognized, especially if I decided to raise my prices or something like that. That is a lot of imposter syndrome needs to be overcome when anybody decides to raise their prices or to get rid of a service that they once offered or to add a new service, anything like that, or just having a big goal, having a goal that you've never met before financially or otherwise. If I want to make 6 figures, but take 2 clients a month, which is not by any means what I'm doing now, but I'm just saying, if I wanted to get there, you're going to have new obstacles mentally to overcome.
Yeah, absolutely. So what is next for you personally and for Olivia Acton Photography? What is your vision and your plans for the future?
Yeah, that's a good question. So in terms of financially, I just growth, right? Continuous, steady growth is where I want to be. For me, that is vital to my life and supporting my family. In terms of personally, again, to prioritize my time, to take those breaks, to be able to go on several vacations a year with my family and give my kids a really good childhood experience. Like, life is hard enough, no matter how much money you make, no matter what kind of position you're in, life is hard enough just living in the world that we live in. And intaking the information that we intake on a daily basis, that, even if it's not personally happening to us, right? Like all the wars, all the homelessness, just the problems of the world and us living in this world. It's life is just hard. And so I want to make my kids' lives as happy as possible, because they're going to face so many challenges no matter how great their lives are, so I want them to have the opportunities and the good experiences. I was a pretty troubled teen, and I want my kids to grow up with more stability and not having the issues that I had to overcome. So there's that, I think, on a personal level. And yeah, in my business, I want to continue to connect with my community. I love being involved in the community. And the more that I have been doing it, the more just personal satisfaction that I gain. And not only does it help my business grow, but it just helps me grow. So I think that that's a big goal. It's just to continue community involvement and, continue to make people love the experience, right? So when you have a really good portrait experience, it can be life-changing, and it can be seeing yourself in a different light, knowing that going from being a person that just absolutely hates having their photo taken, hates the way they look in photos, doesn't really like the way they look in general, to perhaps seeing themselves in a different light and, providing that service to people. It feels so good for me, and it feels so good for them. So continuing to do that and allow people to come in and work with me and, have really good experiences where they feel like they love what they see. They feel great about themselves. They want to put it on their walls. They want to display it. They are proud to show their friends and family, and to not have people just, it really sucks to pay a certain amount, even if it's not that much. It's a waste of time and money to get photos that you just don't love. You don't want to show them to people. You don't, you're embarrassed of them. You don't want to look at them. You don't want to put them in your house. And when you have that good experience, it gives my clients confidence. It brings people into their homes and they say, look at this. Look at my family. Look at my baby. I love providing that service for people, and I'm always tweaking my services. So in terms of like what I offer, I'm always looking for the highest quality products, but also my one-to-one interactions with people and how to make them the most comfortable. So all that stuff is where I envision my business going and continuing to go. I think that I'm on the path that I want to be on right now, and just continue with consistency over time will, I'm just going to keep doing what I do and tweaking things along the way to kind of, be at that ultimate goal.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Olivia. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners? We'll definitely put your website and links in the show notes, but is there anything else you want to share with our listeners about your business or what you got going on?
Well, let me just say the services that I provide. So I photograph anywhere from maternity and newborns, and kind of the family side, extended families. And then I also do headshots and branding. And I would say I do about half and half. So my revenue is made up from about half of the business side, half of the kind of family side. I get a lot of questions about what differentiates a luxury photographer from Betty that they're hiring down the street. And so I just wanted to touch on that a little bit. And what differentiates a luxury service is it's not a service that people need. It's a service that people want. Sometimes it's a need, right? If it's a business growth need, but most of the time it's a service that people want, that it's not a need, but it can benefit their lives. It can make them feel good. It can make their lives easier. So I always do consults beforehand where I'm going into people's homes. I'm helping them pick out their outfits. We're styling based on their decor in their house. I'm creating wall art that goes with what they envision and with their homes that is kind of timeless and will look good in their house forever. I'm providing hair and makeup artistry. I'm providing, a fun, relaxed environment in either a studio or outdoors, depending on their needs, and ordering appointments where they're going in and picking their favorite photos. So you're not going to get, get 100 photos with me unless you really love them all. But most of the time, people are going in and picking their favorites, because when you work with somebody else that will just provide everything, most of the time you only love, maybe 10 of them, right? So I want people to leave with having their absolute favorites, to where every single photo that they own is one that they are just like oohing and ahhing over, that they want to display. People are busy. So if I can take things off their plate to make their lives easier and to meet them where they're at, that's what makes a luxury photographer. And of course, taking great pictures, right? Providing quality images that people are proud to share.
Thank you so much for your time today, Olivia. And I can certainly attest to what a phenomenal photographer you are. I had an amazing experience. I love my photos, and everything you said just further cements to me that you were the right person to choose to work with. And I'm so excited to continue to work with you over the years.
Hey, thanks for having me, and thanks for all the nice things that you said. I think that that yes, like I love to talk about my business. It's my baby. Like, I've grown it from the ground up, but I really love to connect with other people and learn about their businesses. And it's really great to connect with like-minded people. So I appreciate your friendship and your time and having me today.
Yes. Thank you, Olivia.
Thank you.
Off the Beaten Career Path podcast is a Lit Path Studios production and is produced by Jamie Gale and Katie Myers. Music is by Sasha Gray and Pond 5. If you enjoyed today's show, please leave us a review and share it to your social media. Remember, your career path is up to you to create. Keep exploring, keep pushing boundaries, and keep blazing your own trail.